good afternoon to you all. Nice to see you all. Very good afternoon. We have something very special for you today, students of Matilla Junior High School. In commemoration of Veterans Day 2015, we have invited three very special guests who will talk to us for about a half hour about some of their life experiences that related to their service in the United States Armed Forces during World War II, which for some of you may seem like ancient history. But for these gentlemen, they lived it and they are living history, and we are so thankful that they've joined us today. With that, then, I'd like to introduce our band and our orchestra. We'd like to have the national anthem. Would you all please rise for our flag salute? Thank you. Thank you. You may be seated. As we begin, I'd like to read to you a presidential proclamation given by President Obama. President Obama wrote, "The United States military is the strongest, most capable fighting force the world has ever known. The brave men and women of our Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard demonstrate a resolute spirit and unmatched selflessness, and their service reminds us that there are few things more American than giving of ourselves to make a difference in the lives of others. On Veterans Day, we reflect on the immeasurable burdens borne by so few in the name of so many, and we rededicate ourselves to supporting those who have worn America's uniform and the families who stand alongside them." If you are sitting here today and you are a veteran in our audience, would you please rise so that we might recognize you? Students, if your mom or dad is a veteran, would you please stand that we might recognize them? Thank you, students. And students, if you have another relative who is a veteran, other than your mom or dad, would you please rise? Thank you so much. We have our leadership students have some readings now. Come on up, leadership students.
In 1919, in November, President Wilson decided that November 11th was the official commemoration of soldiers that fought or died in war. He wanted to remember those who fought for hope, freedom, and peace. He called it Armistice Day, but the name was eventually changed to Veterans Day by President Eisenhower in 1954.
Veterans Day is a day to celebrate any person who has ever served in the American war. It was created to honor the people who died risking their lives to save our lives.
To me, Veterans Day is a day of being thankful and giving respect to those who have been in the military. It is a very important day to my family because my grandfather and his dad were in the military. It is a very special day in my family, and it will always be cherished.
This day isn't just another day that we get off school or a day off work. It's a day to celebrate our freedom and the people that make that possible.
What Veterans Day means to me is the people that did the good for our country get to know how much we respect and honor them. They are true American heroes.
Since both of my grandpas served in some way for the military, I have always loved celebrating Veterans Day. To me, Veterans Day is about appreciating my grandpa's bravery and contribution to my world as it is today. I feel that it is also a day for me to realize how lucky I am that they are both still alive.
It means something special to me because my dad served as a medic.
Veterans Day means a lot to me. I think it's amazing to honor our country's soldiers, and I'm glad to live in the U.S.
I think that this is one of the most important holidays for our country. The reason this holiday is so important is because we need to honor the brave people who gave their lives to save the people of this country.
People should celebrate Veterans Day because it says thank you to all the people who are fighting in the war.
Veterans Day has always been very important to me because I like to honor everyone who fought for us.
Veterans Day to me is a day to celebrate my great-grandfather and everyone else who served with him.
Most countries have their own day set aside for their soldiers, but I believe America's is special. We are a country bursting from the seams with all our patriotism, and it's part of what makes the U.S. great. I am proud to honor all who have served, and I am proud to call the USA my home.
We offer a great deal of thanks to all that have served, are currently serving, and the soldiers of the future to make our country great.
Thank you, leadership, for those great words. Well, I spoke to our social studies teachers, 7th and 8th grade teachers, and I asked them to talk to you and ask you what you wanted to ask our special guest today. And I have a list of questions that we've gone through, and I'm going to present those right now, so you might hear some questions that you asked yourself. But first, I'd like to introduce our guests. Our first guest to my immediate right is, his name is Harold Wilder Jr., Lieutenant Wilder. Lieutenant Wilder flew a plane that looks just like this in World War II. It's called a B-24 bomber, and he flew it over the skies of Europe around Nazi Germany during World War II. Lieutenant Wilder. Our next guest his name is Tom Jameson, Major Tom Jameson. If I can get this back on there. Can I get it? There it is. And Major Jameson flew the same plane, same type of plane, not the very same plane, over the skies of the South Pacific in what's called the Pacific Theater in our fight against Japan during World War II. Major Jameson. Our third guest, his name is Chief Master Sergeant R.T. Lee, Jr. And Chief Master Sergeant, by the way, that's E9, and if you know anything about military, that's the highest enlisted rank, and it's E9s who actually ran the military, I'm told. And Mr. Lee flew as what's called a Tuskegee Airman, and I understand it was in the South Pacific?
Yes.
Flying vital supply missions for our troops. So thank you all three, and please give a hand for all three of our guests. I want to start our time right now by asking any of you gentlemen, why did you go in the military? Any of you, why did you go in the military in the first place? And how many years did you serve?
Well, I served 26 years and 13 days. And, well, when I graduated high school, was in the midst of World War II. And you were either in the military or you were a 4F, and nobody wanted to be a 4F.
A 4F.
4F.
What does a 4F mean?
Disqualified for any type of service.
Flat fee, some reason you can't serve.
For some reason you can't serve.
Yeah. Okay. So 26 years and 13 days, did I hear that correctly?
You heard that correctly.
Wow. How about you, Tom?
I guess I'm an old guy. I graduated from high school in 1939, and at that time, President Roosevelt was implementing his draft. So the most of us that got out of high school in those days went directly into the military by signing up for the draft. I didn't want to sign up for the draft because I didn't want to be drafted in the infantry. So I immediately, after getting out of high school, enlisted in the Army Air Corps, as it was called in those days, so I could become a pilot. I wanted to fly. That worked out okay, and I went into service in September 1940. I was in the South Pacific all my combat career. I flew 52 combat missions while there, and ended up in the Philippines, going from Australia, East Indies to the Philippines. And I stayed in the reserve. When I got home, I was going to fly for an airline, and decided not to. I went to work for the FAA, and I flew, and I was in the Air Force Reserve for a total of 22 years. So, but I consider myself the original draft dodger, since I didn't sign up for the draft but enlisted so I could get the service that I wanted to serve in.
Thank you. So let me ask you, Hal, how did you become a pilot, Hal?
Well, my dad had been one of the first 100 pilots back in 1918. And of course, in between the wars, I grew up knowing all his buddies who would, by that time, were wearing stars, you know, the Hap Arnold and Chewy Spots were freaking guests in our home between the war. So I knew I wanted to fly. And I graduated from college in 1937. No, in 1941. I high school in 37. But by that time, I had been drafted into an ammunition plant where they needed me to do something there, and I worked until the Air Corps called, and it was the Air Corps called me up in February of 43. I was a draft dodger, no question about it. I didn't want to stay in industry, and I became an aviation cadet. And it took a year to get through that and into, at any rate, the war was going on and I was being left behind, and I think that's just wonderful. And I flew until we ran out of war in April of 45 and went home.
Well, thank you. Now, R.T. Lee, you were a member of a very famous group of flyers called the Tuskegee Airmen.
Yes.
Can you tell us something about that? What did it mean to be a Tuskegee Airman?
Well, when I graduated high school, you either 4F or you're in the service. So I decided to go in the service, but I didn't want to go in the infantry. I wanted to fly. And it said, well, you're black, you can't fly. Oh, that's not so. I'm going to fly. And fly I did. And I flew for, well, I was a fighter pilot originally, flying after those B-24s. And believe me, they were that's an aircraft, believe me. But they changed aircraft. They changed from the P-40 to the P-51, which was too hot for me. It was too hot for me. And I became, well, I went to they needed pilots in the CBI, China, Burma, and India. And so I flew C-46s. I flew C-46s and over the hump. And believe me, that hump is an experience that I shall not ever forget. I remember it today just like it was yesterday. And it happened. But I made it. Now, to be a Tuskegee Airman is a blessing. I wasn't supposed to be able to fly. I was black, but I flew, and the whole outfit flew, and it flew missions, and flew missions, and flew missions. I only had 26 missions, but I flew 26 missions in the C-109 and the C-46. Okay? To be a Tuskegee Airman is just a blessing. I'm proud of it, and I'll always be proud of it. And I'm a Tuskegee Airman. I'm a Tuskegee Airman. Okay? Thank you.
So, Tom, let me ask you, Tom, what's a typical day in the life of a pilot during World War II? It can't be all dropping bombs.
No, we had well, I'll give you an example of a quick example of a day that we flew a mission. We'd get up about 4 o'clock in the morning, and we'd have a little breakfast and get all our gear together, depending on what our target was and where we were going. We had met the intelligence officer, and he would brief us on the mission. We'd take off, do our mission, and come back, always met by our flight surgeon, counting airplanes and checking out the condition of the crew. And we were debriefed on the mission, and we did sometimes 2 missions a day. They were short. But there was a lot of excitement that I really don't need to get into right now. That during the mission, we sometimes hit a lot of anti-aircraft fire and a lot of enemy airplanes and so forth. But that was all part of the day's work. But when we weren't flying a mission, we were always, particularly the officers, were given a collateral duty assignment. Operations officer, mess officers. Remember, I was in the South Pacific, and we moved from island to island, pitched our own tent, and had horrible living conditions. But we had lots to do between missions, catching up on the history of the warfare going on at that particular moment in the South Pacific, and try to help figure out the strategy to the next for the next mission. So we were busy both flying missions and doing collateral duties in other days.
Thank you. So Hal, I want to ask you, would you describe a typical bombing mission during World War II?
Well, our situation was totally different. We were flying, I think there were 35 groups of 28 4-engine bombers, B-17s, B-24s, flying out of Italy. Another bunch flying out of England. And we were pretty well swamping the German targets. But the fighter group had essentially destroyed the Luftwaffe fighters. I never saw a German fighter plane pointed at me. But the flak batteries got to be something pretty awful.
Can you tell us what you mean by flak batteries for kids who don't know what that means?
All right, a flak cannon fires a 14-inch diameter shell, 3 inches diameter and 14 inches long, I should say, full of explosives. And it breaks up into little particles which go flying all over. So they would just put up a cloud of this stuff, and we would have to fly through it. People ask, did you ever get hit? Well, we always got hit, but usually by small pieces which just tore the skin on the plane. Sometimes cut a fuel line or did something critical. Sometimes actually brought an airplane down. If one went off in the airplane would go down. I remember one day seeing another plane had been hit by a direct hit, I guess, because we saw the two pilots still strapped in their seats, and their heads hanging. They were obviously unconscious, so they were just falling through the air. And of course, they were going to hit the ground, and that was going to be it. But the flak cannons increased in volume as the armies from the invasion over in France, as those armies worked their way east through Germany. Every time we were about to capture a target town, the Germans would pull their cannons out and put them somewhere else. So that where the first missions I flew in late December of '44, they had briefed us on a dozen guns. The last mission I flew in April of '45, they briefed us on 700 guns at the target, all shooting at us, and always hitting us with something, scared us to death. It was pretty scary stuff.
Thank you. RT, can you share with the students some memorable moment or experience you had during World War II?
Well, I had many memorable experiences. The first experience I had was when I went to Tuskegee Army Airfield. I was dumb. I didn't know. And I rode a train to Biloxi, Mississippi. And so I called for transportation, which I did. But I said, well, I think I'll get me a sandwich while I'm here. So I went to the bus station, which was nearby, and wanted to get me a sandwich. And the guy, excuse me, I'm not going to say what he said to me, and I'm not going to say my reply, but I'm going to say that, make a long story short, I was arrested. And I would have been arrested and convicted were it not for the local provost marshal who came and got me released. So that was my introduction to the South.
Was this something about not being allowed into certain establishments?
That's true. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But I knew it then.
Aren't we glad those days are over? Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
But I'm not sure you were done. Were you done with that, with your story?
I beg your pardon?
Was there something else you wanted to tell us about?
That was it.
All right. Well, let me ask Tom. Tom, tell us about how do the bombing mission work? I know that something about the pilot gives up control of the plane. Tell us about how does that actually work in those days?
Well, what we normally did, the crew, the pilots flew the aircraft to the target area. And when we got closer to the target, we would zero in on the what we call IP, the initial point. And at the initial point, which would be maybe, and I'm guessing 20 miles, 30 miles, 10 miles from the target, depending on what the target was. If it was anti-aircraft guns and so forth we were knocking out, or strips, aircraft strips that we wanted to put our heavy bombs into to make big craters so they couldn't come up after us. We would line up with the target, the pilot would line up with the target. The bombardier, who was in the nose of the airplane, would then actually take control of that airplane as far as direction goes, to zero in on, do all the fine tuning necessary to get that aircraft to a point where he could release the bombs. And that point varied depending on our altitude, speed, and so forth. So he actually flew the airplane for just a minute or so through his equipment, and always like to guarantee the pilot that I'm going to hit this target. So that's how he got involved in that part of the mission.
Thank you. I want to ask all three of you a question. I want to ask you, what important lessons did you learn from your experiences in the United States military that would help our students today? What would you like to share with them that you think is important from what you learned? Any of you? RT, looks like you're ready to go.
I'm ready. And my wife wrote it down. I memorized it. But first of all, they should aim high. Aim high. Be confident in yourself. Okay? Oh boy, I can't read. Be ready to go. Be sure that you know what you want to do and do it. And that's way you're going to be successful. Okay?
That's great advice. Thank you. RT, did you happen to bring your lovely wife with you today?
Yes, I brought my lovely wife.
Where is she?
I don't know where she is.
Mrs. Lee, where are you? There she is, Mrs. Madeline Lee. How long have you two been married?
57 years.
Only 57
Only
years.
57
Only 57 years. Wow. Okay, gentlemen, how about you? Any lessons that you learned that you'd like to share with our students today?
Well, I have a couple little things. One, that I think that the military service provides everybody that's in the service a springboard to a future civilian life. But you've got to take advantage of what they have to offer. You can go into any branch of the service and learn a lot of different vocations, you might say, that you could continue on. But the best thing that I ever encountered was, regardless of the specific, it prepared me to go to work for the Federal Aviation Administration or fly for an airline by being a pilot. But the thing that you have to do is work hard, take advantage of everything they had, and so you could actually select a vocation if you wish. And they have an awful lot of opportunities in the military that you could take advantage of and continue on in your civilian life.
Thank you very much. And Hal, we have a about a minute or so to go. Any thoughts you have for important lessons you learned that you want to share with our students?
Well, I think the obvious one is that the Second World War was the last war that we won, and it's the last war that has ended. Wars are instigated by bullies, and we learned early when I was in first grade, at 6 years old. We learned that there were bullies in this world, and they wanted to push anybody around that would push. And my father learned once that I had run away from a fight, and he gave me a licking with a razor strap. She says, "You're going to get one of these every time you run away, because if you don't fight back against the bully, he won't quit." And this is something I learned. I've never been bothered by bullying again, but right now, the whole world is being bothered by bullies, and we have people trying to buy them off. And that is a sad affair. I'm glad I'm not young anymore.
Thank you. So I want to ask, if you don't mind my asking, RT, would you mind if I ask you, what is your age?
I'm 90.
You're 90.
Yes.
Tom, and what is your age?
I'm a 94.
94. Yes?
Is now a good time? I'd like to add a couple of
Yeah.
things.
Let me just ask Hal. Hal, how old are you?
I'm 97.
97. And Tom, you wanted to add something?
No, I was thinking here when you were talking, one of the things that impressed me is what was going on in World War II versus now, and the differences. I was fortunate enough to be in the Philippines about 3 or 4 weeks because General MacArthur said, "I want a heavy bomb group up there." But the only thing I wanted to say about that was all the decisions that were made that I remember in World War II were made by the military. And I was proud that President Roosevelt gave our military commanders the authority to conduct the strategy and carry out the warfare, because he said, all I want to know from you guys, all I want you guys to do is get me to Japan as fast as you can. And I don't know anything about that. You guys know the strategy. So in comparing it to today's, I thought that World War II and later on part of Korea, when I was recalled there, that was the last war that we had that was non-political.
Amen.
And I hate to see the politicians, if I can say so, I hate to see the politicians take over the military strategy today.
Amen.
Well, thank you. I want to thank all three of you for your service to our country and for sharing your lives with us this afternoon. And I'd like to invite our, thank you, yes, let's just applause here. Don't please rise again.